We asked church spokesman Tommy Davis and church attorney Monique Yingling about disconnection, and they denied the church forces any Scientologist to break off communication with a family member or friend.
Who a Scientologist chooses to be in communication with or not is the choice of that individual Scientologist, whether they're a member of the Sea organization, whether they're a parishioner, or otherwise. It is absolutely and completely their choice.
Tommy Davis, who's now the chief spokesman for the church, has said to us that there is no policy of disconnection.
Well, he's kind of put a little bit of a twist on it, because the truth of the matter is it is your own choice to disconnect. You don't have to. You can say, no, I'm not going to disconnect. But then what happens to you is that you can't go into the church and other people won't speak to you. So there's ways of enforcing this. It's kind of a manipulative way. Yeah, you don't have to. My parents could have said, we're not disconnecting from our daughter. And then, you know, they would have had the repercussions of it from the rest of the Scientologists, and they want to have something to do with this organization, that their spiritual salvation is at risk, and they don't want to lose that. They don't want to lose maybe their jobs if they're working for a Scientologist. So they decide, well, I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to follow, you know, the orders and the commands and the things I'm being told to do so that I can not have my life messed up.
And there's an interview with Tommy Davis. Tommy Davis, who is the spokesperson for the church, he's being asked about the policy of disconnection.
Church, but if you're a member of the Church of Scientology and someone in your family or a friend or your spouse is skeptical or critical of the Church of Scientology, you are supposed to disconnect yourself from that person.
We consider family to be a building block of any society. So anything that's characterized as disconnection or this kind of thing, it's just not true. There isn't any such policy that in the church that's dictating who people should or should not be in communication with. You know, it just doesn't happen. Anything that's characterized as disconnection or this kind of thing, it's just not true. There isn't.
I confronted him about this, and I said, Tommy, this happened to my wife. You asked her and me to disconnect from her parents because of something trivial they did. Tommy outright lies and says that about the policy of disconnection. Says that no, that doesn't exist. I mean, why would he lie like that, straight lie? So I wonder what else he's lying about.
What seems to be, in a sense, curious is, at least according to L. Ron Hubbard's own words, and I quote, "The head of the Galactic Confederation, 76 planets around larger stars fizzle from here."
I can stop you.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about. Okay. I'm familiar with the material. Here's the thing. There are outrageous claims out there on the internet about what Scientologists believe.
The basic belief system, or the basic tenet of the Church of Scientology, is to rid the body of space alien parasites, to clear oneself.
Well, John, does that sound silly to you? I mean, it's unrecognizable to me.
The galactic warlord, who 75 million years ago sort of put people's aliens.
John, I already answered this too. I told you none of us know what you're talking about. It's like loony. It's weird. It makes you look weird. It's foremost a religion. It is only a religion. It isn't a business. It never has been and never would be.
Tommy says this as we stand in the middle of Bridge Publications, where they pump out up to 1 million CDs, books and packages, shipped and sold around the world each week for who knows how much money. Scientology won't say. According to Tommy Davis, Scientology has grown more in the past year than in the previous 5 years. Apparently the figures to prove that are in a building just down the road here in Hollywood, but Tommy hasn't shown us. The protest group Anonymous claims that Scientology's numbers are falling. And in Australia, we've met dozens of ex-members who say hundreds have left and hundreds more will flee this group.
John Travolta's 16-year-old son, Jet, who had autism, died from a seizure in January. Do you know if the church ever advised them not to allow their son to receive certain medications for conditions?
Absolutely not. Never happened. The church never advised them in any way, shape, or form whatsoever on any aspect of their son's treatment. Never have, never will. The Scientologists, like many people, like anybody, we go to doctors. If somebody's sick, some sort of physical ailment, we go to the doctor, you get a prescription, whatever the course of treatment that would be recommended by a doctor, you're going to do that. And, it's very important. It's not, really it's actually something that's mandatory from the church's viewpoint. Someone has some sort of physical difficulty or problem, something's happening with them, they're ill, go to a doctor, get it checked out, find out what's going on. If it involves a prescription or whatever treatment the doctor recommends, they're going to do that.
Does the Church of Scientology acknowledge there is such a thing as autism?
To the degree you have a medical condition, like there's something going on, like seizures or some sort of physical problem that's happening with the body, that's going to get treated by a doctor. But the church doesn't involve itself in diagnosing or classifying medical conditions. It's just not. As a church, we deal with the spirit, and in terms of bodies and the handling of physical problems, that's something for the medical community.
But will you acknowledge that autism does exist in the world? Not so much, I'm not saying you'll diagnose it. Sure. But is there such a thing as autism in this world of Scientology?
To the degree that you have the medical community acknowledging that there is this thing called autism and that it requires treatment and doctors treat it and so on and so forth, yeah, absolutely. I think I would go the other way from it. There's this misconception or this thing that I've certainly seen that the church doesn't, quote unquote, recognize autism. It's just not true. It's not. We don't recognize or not recognize anything. We're a church, and if you're dealing with medical conditions, that's doctors. Doctors do that. We tell Scientologists, you have something going on physically, you have to go to a doctor. You have to get that properly treated.
The Scientologists don't believe in mental conditions being treated with drugs. They believe they have the answer. And so they will handle this disorder with Scientology auditing, assist, and or vitamins. So they believe that they know what they're doing.
And what is a Scientology funeral like?
It's pretty conventional in terms of what most people would be familiar with a funeral. You have a minister, an ordained Scientology minister that would conduct the service, and often family or friends will talk and about the person who's passed away. You could have a eulogy, these kinds of things.
Will you see a lot of people grieving and crying, or does that defeat the purpose of what you believe in, that they're not really dead?
Well, here's the thing. Whenever anyone experiences a loss, it's a huge emotional loss for anyone to be gone.
But crying would
of course. Anyone's going to grieve with that kind of loss, and anyone would. For any Scientologist, it's really no different than anyone else in that anyone grieves the loss of a loved one or a friend or anyone that they know. And I think just from a simpler concept, Scientologists are like anybody else. You have your family and you have your loved ones, and to the degree that they're there with you, that's a wonderful thing. And when they're gone and they're not around anymore, that's a loss.
Scientologists believe in more than one lifetime. So what does this one lifetime mean? What does this one kid mean for eternity? You learn that, yes, your daughter's your daughter this lifetime, but maybe she was your mother last lifetime, and she might be your husband another lifetime. So you don't really value your interpersonal relationships with your kids. This is an example. This is a Scientologist, mind you, to their daughter. It was great having you as a daughter this lifetime, and maybe we can pick you up in the future. Maybe we can pick you up in the future.
I walk into the parking lot, and the security chief from OSA Int comes up and says, Aaron hung himself last night. And that was it. And I said, did he die? And she said, yeah. And I stood there screaming and crying alone. And they all walked away from me, and there was no consolation. And I thought, well, how am I supposed to react to this? And I screamed. And I had no one to comfort me. There was nobody. There were people, but there was nobody. They all walked away from me. They looked at me like I was awkward, what do we do with this person, right? And
we were raised in Scientology where real emotion other than anger is not really looked upon kindly.
You just learn that if you say to anyone that you're hurt or that you feel sad or that you feel any emotion, that is a bad thing, and you will get reprimanded and interrogated, and you will be attacked. You know, knock it off, and what are you doing, and get with it.
They didn't let me see him. They made me leave before his body was taken out.
Who made you leave?
OSA.
Not the police?
No. And I went back to post. I went back to work. Luckily, my desk was in a corner, so I could just sit there and cry. And I was an executive in my organization and couldn't tell anybody there what had happened. I wasn't allowed to have a proper service for him. I wasn't allowed to spread his ashes on my own.
And about 6 months after I joined the Sea Org, I get a phone call from my dad. And I called him back and he said, there's been an accident and your brother has died. And I just lost it. And I had to fight to go to the funeral.
Why?
My commanding officer was like, oh, he was just an SP.
What?
He was just a suppressive person. Why would you bother taking time off post to go to the funeral? And like, he's my identical twin brother. That's why.
When my mother died, it took me about 5 to 7 days of security checks before I could leave the base to go to her memorial service. And everybody was trying to dissuade me and saying, why do you need to go? She's already dead. Why do you need to go?
Wow.
Is Mr. Miscavige violent towards Scientologists, and has he been physically violent in the past?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He is not. He is not, and it's not in his character, it's not in his nature, and it is not the kind of person he is.
As far as the rest of these allegations, they're absolutely total lies. They're total, utter, complete lies. And I think it bears covering at this point now. A couple things about this. Certainly the likes of Ray Midoff, Mark Ingber, Mark Yeager, Norman Starkey, Guillaume Sev, all these people who are current members of the Sea organization. I've spoken with all of them. They absolutely say that they have never, ever, ever been physically struck, attacked, anything, physically contacted, as you tend to put it, aggressively gone after in a physical way, shape, or form by Mr. Miscavige ever. Period. Absolutely not. Never happened. Didn't occur. I didn't take these allegations and go and talk to Dave about them. I'm just not going to do that.
Punch, grab by the neck, throw to the floor. A number of international executives.
He grabbed Mike's head with both his hands and swept him off his feet and smashed his head into a cherry cabinet.
I reached behind my head, and my head was bleeding.
Miscavige told me to beat the guy with the stick. I looked at him and I refused to do that. He took that very severely on me.
David Miscavige comes up, grabs him by the tie, and starts bashing him into the filing cabinets. Then he's thrown out in the street. His tie is ripped off.
He threw Ray Midoff against the wall and took his shirt and, threw him up like this and made him get on his hands and knees and just humiliated him.
I saw horrible things going on, wholesale abuses.
He said, "Where is that mother?" And he just walked up and he hit me on the side of the head.
If that was a punch in the face one day, it was a punch in the face. If it was a stupid name tag, and this became the routine at the international headquarters of Scientology.
It was just a constant thing, and it didn't stop.
We all go down to this storage room. Miscavige comes in the door and sees this guy. He beats him with his fists, he elbows him with his elbows, he knees him with his knees, and when he's down on the floor, he kicks him with his feet.
Stop. One time,
David Miscavige, when in the meeting, he took Mark Yeager's head and Guillaume's head, and he put his arms around just their heads, and he squeezed them together so much that the veins in his face were popping out, and you could see him, his arms and his face were beet red from squeezing these guys' heads together, and their ears were bleeding after that.
One former member says that Mr. Miscavige had a vest tailored for his dog with epaulets, similar to those that would be worn by Sea Org members, and he would order staffers to salute the dog.
That is utterly, completely, totally ridiculous.
Your own reaction was one of complete disbelief, I think it's fair to say.
Because it's unbelievable.
And yet, there are consistencies between individuals who observe the dog dressed in a particular way and a particular breed.
And he literally had somebody tailor a blue vest sweater for his beagle dog and made up epaulets, these Sea Org ranks in the Sea Organization, and he had 4 stripes put on, captain, for the dog. And he would bring the dog in. If those guys didn't salute the dog, he would just viciously berate them and invalidate them.
Hang on a sec. You're saying that he ordered the most senior ranks in the Church of Scientology to salute his dog?
Yes, sir.
Amy Scobie also confirms that Mr. Miscavige would bring his dog round dressed like a uniformed member, and if the dog barked, she says he would suggest that the individual towards whom the dog barked was behaving badly, had some kind of negative problem. Is that true?
I don't know. I mean, maybe we should have the dog come in here and see if it barks at you, Martin.
He comes with his dog with a sweater with commander stripes. And the dog let out a little bark when she saw me. And David Miscavige said, you know, you got something going on, because she is detecting out ethics and you have something going on.